We are joined in studio now by the Minister for Veterans, the Honourable Chris Penk. Minister, thank you for your time.
Kia ora, thank you for having me.
Can I get your initial response to what you've just seen in that story?
Well, it's just absolutely staggering, the courage, comradeship and commitment shown by these guys, including Mr Papanui himself. Unbelievable, just really humbling to see that. And I was really struck by the rangatahi who were doing the performance, not that much younger than some of these guys, and now guys and girls who we send into these theatres. It's absolutely extraordinary, so really humbling to see.
OK, now, as we saw in the story, your colleague, the Minister for Defence, Julian Wilcox, has made a decision about whether or not these soldiers should receive some award for the bravery that they showed at Hermit Park. Do you think they should receive medals for the bravery that they showed there?
Yeah, well, clearly they showed extraordinary bravery. I'm not the decision maker, but I can say on behalf of veterans, I think in this country we can do better in general to recognise the service and the sacrifice they've made. Yeah. And that's for the young men and now the young men and women themselves, but also their whānau, all those who are affected by that. It means something to a community to recognise that. I think a couple of the barriers that face us in the modern day when we're looking at these questions of acknowledging historic actions, whether it's medallic recognition or particular awards for bravery, is that sometimes the historical records aren't clear. They weren't turning their mind to these things at the time, which is understandable, but it also means we've got a real dilemma in 2024 in the modern era for how we do that. And of course the criteria as well. I mean, maybe that's something we can look at overall, but for the decision maker, in this case, the Defence Minister, she's got to look at those as they exist now.
Completely understand that there are rules in place. Right? It appears though that the Australian government is prepared to bend and change their rules to reflect the service and the bravery of those, including the likes of Bill Papuni, that it would like to acknowledge. Why are we not prepared to do the same?
Well, I mean, they might have different criteria, so that's maybe a pretty narrow, legalistic kind of approach, but that's as it is now. I think the bigger question and the more important one is actually, can we do better in this country in a way that the likes of Australia do to recognise our veterans? And sometimes that comes to particular deployments where we're both there. And obviously the heart of the gentleman's story was that he was part of it. He was part of their story. They're part of our story. So if we can get better at recognising our veterans by leaning on the work that's done by our like-minded partners overseas, then maybe that helps us get across the line ourselves.
It's interesting because I hear you talking about it. It sounds like you're open to it. It sounds like they should be recognised and receive medals for the bravery that they showed. Just from talking to you and listening to you now, that's what it appears like to me.
Well, I don't think anyone could fail to be moved by what they've seen. Extraordinary story, clearly. But again, just in terms of the rules as they exist now, and look, that's not necessarily good enough for us as a government and as a society to say, well, the rules say this. We get the ability to change the rules. So maybe that's what we should do to make it easier for us to recognise the service that I think we would all recognise as absolutely extraordinary, above and beyond even the normal call of duty.
And you are a veteran? You served in Australia?
Yeah, I did serve in Australia. I mean, gee, nothing that should be mentioned in the same breath as that.
No, but there is an accusation that given the variances between the way in which veterans are served in Australia and New Zealand, that the accusation could be that New Zealand veterans are poorly served by comparison to our Anzac compatriots and colleagues.
Yeah, I've certainly heard that argument, and there's also the case of people who, like myself, as you say, served in one military but live in the other country or whatever, so maybe there's some sort of exchange or reciprocal arrangements we can do better on.
Do you agree with the accusation, though?
Yeah, I think we can and should do better, but I think it depends what you mean. If you're talking about the actual services, in New Zealand, because we've got the ACC regime, which is different, actually it's not an apples comparison if you're looking at the services that the Department of Veteran Affairs in Australia provides. However, if the question is whether we can get better at acknowledging, almost at an emotional level, not even necessarily the services relating to illness and injury, but actually the way the status, the mana that we accord to these men and women, I think we can do better as they do overseas.
How do we do that?
Well, I mean, I'm hopeful that, come Anzac Day in less than a week from now, we're going to see, our sort of national pride, and I say that not in a jingoistic sense, but in terms of acknowledging that. Australia, they'll do it too. Invite your audience to compare and contrast. They do it in a way that reflects their sort of national ethos, but I think we can be more overt, and also 364 days a year that aren't the 25th of April, we can, do a lot better at recognising them. Now, part of that responsibility is onus on me, but also I think in general in society.
I read the briefing to the incoming minister that was sent to you by Veterans Services or by the department. It mentioned something about a kawenata, or a covenant between the New Zealand government and its people and veterans. Do you support that idea? Is that a way of achieving what we've just been talking about now?
Yeah, I love the concept. That would have to come from Defence, because what we're talking about there is a relationship between Defence on behalf of the Crown and those who sign up to serve. But actually it's deeply relevant to the veterans question, and that's why I'm so interested in it. Because if you think about a young person who might think about joining Navy, Army, Air Force today, if they're going to say, well, in 10, 20, 30 years from now, what does my life look like? How will I be supported? Then actually that's a good argument, even in terms of the current Defence Force, to treat these people well. So I'm open to it, and that's something I'm looking at, and I think you do need to recognise a special bond in some way.
You denied a plea, though, from the NZRSA to keep the Veterans Independence Program untouched. So Veterans Affairs has restricted access to that scheme, and now is in place since March 13. Why did you do that, given it was a national initiative in the first place in 2015?
Yeah, no, look, it's a great idea, and I'm really supportive of it being recontinued. We're just on a pause at the moment. We've got a certain amount of resource that came through in the last budget, passed under the last government, and that resource has to be applied where it is most needed. And that's for veterans who are injured or ill in the course of their service, who are taking, it's taking a year or even up to 2 years for their claims to get processed. That's not good enough. I've said, look, the resources should go there, and in the meantime, the Veterans Independence Program, which is more along the lines of enabling veterans to stay in their own home, very worthy, but less important, less urgent. It's window washing, it's lawn mowing. I'd like to get back to that, but we've got to get our priorities right at the moment.
So what are those who are leaving the Defence Force now and therefore might have to access service for things like illness or injury or rehabilitation that would have been under the VIP scheme but now can't be provided to them because they've fallen out of that March 13 window?
Yeah, I think actually there's been a bit of misconception there. I think some of, and with all due respect, I think some of those players within the RSA in the different regions, as opposed to the national body, who really get this stuff. I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding there. If you are injured or ill in the service of this country as a veteran, you should get, and you will continue to get, those services. Actually, the change that was made recently and advised by the Chief of Defence Force should actually improve the situation of those people who currently are waiting far too long.
Okay. As a part of the BIM also, I came across something which was interesting to me. This has to do with the Y claim, Y2500, the Māori Military Veterans Kaupapa Inquiry. What reports have you got about that claim from your department thus far? Yeah,
I mean, obviously the BIM itself, the briefing to incoming minister, and that's something I'm really interested in. Clearly the place of Māori in the Defence Force over the years has been massive. It's hugely significant, even in today's terms, or especially in today's terms, but of course a lot of people associate with the Māori battalions heroic feats, and is recognised even, by the enemy at the time. So look, we can do a lot better in terms of recognising that historic contribution, and I think it's a really wonderful partnership that we could actually encourage, and maybe the kawanata or covenant is a good way in to do that.
Okay, because the other thing is, how is it that we can still allow to exist, and this is the claim, that Māori veterans suffer disproportionate risk of harm, discrimination, lack of recognition, inadequate care and rehab, welfare and entitlements. How can we allow that to occur? It makes a mockery of the way in which we memorialise things like the Māori Battalion on Anzac Day, right?
I agree.
So I know you talk about the kawanata, and I know it's something under consideration, but what do you think, and I know it's early for initial responses, but there seems like there's something that needs to be acknowledged in this claim that comes from you as Minister, right?
Yeah, look, I think so. And I think actually, sadly, this is mirroring a lot of the inequities in various different government services in terms of Māori population outcomes, be it health, education and so on. So in that sense, it's not unique, but it is a problem for our veteran population and for those of Māori descent to have disproportionately poor outcomes. So a little bit of that, I think, has been good work that's continued on, since the previous government, and I'm pleased to say that's a bipartisan attitude to these across the political aisle. That's the Te Arataki Symposium, and that's government agencies getting together and comparing notes. There is a Māori element to that, but there's also a general element, and actually, if you think about those who are disproportionately poorly served by government services, that's going to bring up those that cohort fastest of all.
Minister, thank you for your time. I appreciate you appearing on the program. Thank you.